Hello again, and welcome to a Viridescent podcast. I am your host, Hassan Green. This is episode number 7, which, if you're superstitious or you're in the lucky numbers, hopefully the 7th one is a lucky one. At least a decent podcast, a decent episode, let's hope. This one will be kind of serious. I'll talk about a couple of serious things. Of course, I'll talk about many different things. This is, like I said, the 7th of my episodes. This is the 3rd of the video ones. And since we're talking about lucky numbers and whatnot, let's maybe hope 3rd time's a charm. Who knows? We'll see. But I'll talk about a few things. I'll talk about a few things in depth. And then talk about a few smaller things, kind of funny, weird things that happened lately, and also get a riddle in there, which, as you probably might know, is what's coming up next. Thanks for watching. Hope you stick it in, or Jesus, stick it in. Wow, where's my mind at? Let's hope you stick around through the whole episode. Here comes a riddle. All right, it is riddle time. Again, no prize. Just use your brain, okay? Figure it out. Have some fun, okay? The riddle reads as follows. Some people see me to be linear. To others, I'm not. I'm always marching forward and can never stop. I watch you in your days until we have to part ways. What am I? Again, some people see me to be linear. To others, I'm not. I'm always marching forward and can never stop. I watch you in your days until we have to part ways. What am I? And you'll get your answer at the end of the show. And now I'm going to talk about some stuff. Please listen. All right, the first thing I want to talk about, first topic of discussion in this episode, is in regards to mental health awareness. A few things have happened recently with one or two people that I know very closely. And outside of my very close circle of friends and family, there are a couple or a few people out there that are dealing with whatever they're dealing with. And I'm aware of it, or I've, witnessed symptoms or signs, if you will, and have checked in on a couple of those people just to say hello. And you'd be surprised with just a simple message of just saying hi, how have you been, how that can work wonders. But May is Mental Health Awareness Month, at least this year it is. And I'll tell you guys, check on people, even if you're not totally sure if something's bothering them. Drop them a line, shoot them a text, send them a DM, private message, call them, stop by where they work, or roll past their humble abode and say, hey. Just a simple gesture can work wonders. I kind of mentioned this before. I think it might have been in my last episode, the previous episode, about how, and it was more in regards to cultures, the diverse cultures and races in this country, for example, how each culture seems to have its own month, like their history month or their heritage month. And mental health is something, your mentality, period. Your mental health is something that sticks with you every day, much like the color of your skin or your heritage, your culture. It sticks with you every single day, no matter what you do. And I mentioned the concept that I mentioned in the last episode about how, for example, Black History Month or Black history should be acknowledged all 12 months out of the year. Hispanic heritage, Asian heritage, the Jewish heritage, whatever you can think of should be acknowledged and respected every single month. And the same thing, yet again in this case, should be for mental health awareness. We should be aware of our own mental health and our family and our friends' mental health, the people we care about. We should be aware all the time. Obviously not so much that it preoccupies or consumes your own time, keeps you from looking out for yourself or doing what you need to do on a daily basis. But we should just be aware all the time, not just in May. Now, one's mental health can be compromised. It doesn't matter if they're male, female, gay, straight, young, or old. Anyone can suffer from anything, whether it's depression or anxiety or a mixture of both, or a bipolar disorder or schizophrenia or paranoia, anything you can think of. It can happen to anybody. Sometimes it can be mild or moderate or very severe. And we as just normal people, we hope things don't get to be severe for ourselves or anyone else, the people we care about. But for me, and it inspired me, this particular instance inspired me just earlier today, before I decided to choose this segment to talk about. Someone very close to me had gone through a panic attack or two during the day and was just triggered by just something very simple. Yes, I say simple because it didn't take a push, like there wasn't a confrontation or some kind of an instance or an event that really affected that person. It was just spoken words, and they weren't directed towards this person. The person just heard it, and the words affected that person a particular way. It brought up old memories or recent memories, things that had been a bother to that person or gave that person stress, kept that person up at night, and so forth, etc. And a panic attack or two ensued. And I guess for me, when I learned of it, I was a bit naive in assuming that assuming that a panic attack could not happen to this person. And when I learned what that person was going through, I obviously, instantly became very concerned. And it made me sit back and really, really realize that it could happen to anybody. I mean, I had an instance before, I'm kind of going a little off topic. I had an instance before where I was going through a rough patch in life. This is a while back, long ago. I was a teenager. And it was then when I realized that it can happen to anybody. panic attack or a bout of depression, an episode, if you will, can happen to truly anybody. I mean, there I was dealing with what I was dealing with, and really acknowledging and accepting that I was just as human as anyone else. I never meant to be, I guess, egotistical or I can't think of the word right now. I should have known better than to assume that I was invincible. I should have known better, especially as a teenager. But then again, I suppose when you're a teenager, you think you know everything. You think because you think you know everything, that nothing's really going to happen to you, or if something does happen to you, you could just brush it off and get over it, whatever. So that was probably the first time I realized, serious things can happen. Like, serious things can affect your mindset to the point where you could lose control, or you walk that very thin line of falling off into some kind of an abyss, or you hope you stay balanced and you walk that tightrope all the way from one end to the other. Some people don't end up as fortunate as I was. I luckily had people in my corner. I had my mother, my aunt, very, close friends, a doctor or two, that did their jobs respectively and helped me. And that wasn't the first time. As I got older, I went through other things in life, and I got through those, obviously. And also, as I got older, I made, more and more friends. We got to know more and more people, really got to experience more and more about society, and just getting to know different people and the things that they deal with. And if they do deal with very tough things, I got to, watch and learn how they cope or how they deal with difficult things. Not everybody has access to a psychologist or a psychiatrist, whether they're young or old. Not everybody has those resources. And on a side note, you think about people who might not be able to afford health care now, which again is weird, all things considered. I shouldn't say it's weird. It's obscene and it's completely bonkers in this country, but that's a whole other discussion. But yeah, young or old, male or female, whatever the case may be, it can affect everybody. And sometimes even the most Teflon folks, or the folks who have the thickest skin, or who seem to have the thickest skin, or the coldest blood running through their veins. Everybody's human, and at some point everybody has a soft spot, or they will likely experience something that will throw them into a funk. They'll get that kind of proverbial cloud or clouds over their heads. They'll just get down about something. For some folks who have spent most of their lives level-headed, unfortunately, it might be the loss of a loved one. Someone I know personally, I grew up, I still do. I look up to him as one of the greatest role models I ever had in my life. And I remember being younger, being a kid, and becoming a young teenager. Well, it was up until about the time I was 13. But from childhood, as far back as I can remember, childhood up to, officially becoming a teenager at age 13, I looked at him and And he was invincible to me. I mean, I thought he could do no wrong, really. And he went through a period of loss, of grief, and got through it, survived. He, like me, is lucky enough to have a beautiful, wonderful family and friends and a support system that helped him get through things. Because that kind of loss that he suffered is, you don't wish that upon your worst enemy. It's the kind you don't, if you have an enemy, you don't wish it upon your enemy. But there's loss like that. There is loss like I forget what the number is, but it has to be at least half the people who get married, they go through a divorce. And there's loss like that. In my case, there's betrayal and deception and other things that I won't get into detail about, but loss is a loss, and there is depression that can come from that. There is grief that can come from that. Because while someone did not pass away, I still, for example, me, if we're talking about me, I still lost someone, which I've completely gotten over. I mean, if you ask me personally, yes, I'm over that. Some people don't take the same amount of time. Some people can get through that kind of lapse in mental health quicker. Because I must admit, my mental health was compromised during that whole thing. Obviously, especially in the beginning when everything hit me like a ton of bricks. Some people can get over it quick, some people not so quick. And I have to say that because of people aware of the weight of the situation, people aware of my mental health when I was a young man, when I was a teenager, people who are aware of how something like that can affect me or someone in my position, they were aware of my mental health, or they kept aware of my mental health. They checked in on me. They would shoot me a text, or they were very open to listening to me vent. They asked, in my opinion, all the right questions. I mean, I have to say, it was amazing, the folks who had never gone through what I was going through, or maybe still am, however you look at it. It's amazing. Those folks who don't have that kind of life experience, they all, and maybe it's because I picked the right friends, or I have the right friends and family, they asked me all the right questions, or they asked me all the questions they wanted to ask me, or felt they should ask me, or need to ask me the right way. Not a single person who really genuinely had my best interests or my mental health in mind, not a single one of them treated me ill. Not a single one of them further compromised my mental health, especially not in the beginning. So for anyone out there that is going through something, whether it's loss of a loved one, physically or emotionally, or both, or loss of a job, loss of home, anything like that, check in on them. Check in on people anyway. As I said, if you've got a gut feeling, or your intuition, your sixth sense is telling you to check in on somebody, check in on them. Some folks can appear to have everything. They can very well tell you to your face, yeah, I'm fine, I'm okay. But if you're aware that maybe something might be a little off or something like that, drop them a line. I mean, some folks might have all the money in the world or have more money than they know what to do with, but they could have no friends. Or they could, behind closed doors feel like they really don't have anybody. Some of the funniest people you might know, or some of the funniest people you know, might only be funny out in public. There have been comedians over time that have. I don't know. I've been depressed and I've been close to, or I feel like I might have been. I don't know, but I've gone through depression before. I've had low points where I've gone through some sad things. Nothing to the extreme as, for example, comedians. Certain well-known comedians over years, over time, come to mind, where they were some of the funniest people on earth, or the funniest people in the room, but they were living, and they weren't on stage, or they weren't in a movie or something. They weren't doing something funny. They were living within some kind of unfathomable darkness, I guess, to the point where they lost control. They couldn't keep it together. They lost control and ended up doing the worst. They might not have had people checking in on them enough, and I'm not blaming their loved ones or their friends, because honestly, on a side note, there's only so much you can do. There's only so many times you can check in. You as friends and family, if you're thinking, if I've in all this talking, if I'm bringing up an instance that might come to mind, or someone that might have come to your mind, you can't read their minds. No one's figured that out yet. Having said that, I would say just do the best you can to just check in on people. No one's, even if it might seem that way and someone's going through enough or whatever, or they seem like they're going through a lot, you on the outside, you can't read their minds. And no matter how guilty they might try to make you feel, or if you feel bad for their situation, okay, feel bad for their situation, but you just can't read their minds. There's only so much you can do as far as checking in on them, being aware, doing what you can to be of some kind of assistance, to be some kind of support for them. Every little bit helps. And I have to say, if you genuinely care, if you genuinely want to be there for that person, to help them, then do that. And if for some reason you feel like you can't be of help, or hell, you don't want to, try to find them somebody who can or will, I guess. So, I've rambled on about 20 minutes about Mental Health Awareness Month. By the time this episode gets out there, I'd like to think there's at least one more week in May. So if you're just going to deduct it down to being or taking part in Mental Health Awareness Month for as long as May consists, by the time this is out, you should probably have one more week. But like I said at the beginning, you should be aware all the time. Mental health, whether you are mentally healthy or mentally not healthy, or somebody who is or isn't, is with us as people all day, every day. So do the best you can to help yourself, help others. Just be well. Okay, we're going to move on to the next topic. Okay, this next topic is about something I'd like to think every human being does, although maybe because of a genetic or physical deformity, not all of us does. Or not all of us do correctly, I guess. I want to talk about crying. Yeah, that form of showing emotion, crying. It's kind of funny when we think about crying, when we use the word crying, we're either thinking about like a small child or a baby, like something's wrong with that baby or that small child, or if we're using the word crying and we're talking about an older child, a teen, young adult, older adult. For some reason, our minds instinctively think it's negative or something negative has happened. And yeah, a lot of times it does. It really, really does. Or it really is because of something negative. Crying, I think, is an interesting thing. I get a lot of it, or I hear a lot of it, because I have a 2-year-old son in my life. And, well, I mean, I think about my older son, my firstborn, and, he did a lot of crying when he was a small child, and every now and then he does, like any other human being. I do, and I'm going to be 34 in a couple of months. I'm at a point in my life where I sometimes hate now, or sometimes dislike just mentioning what my life change was. And if you still don't know what it is by now, if you're a returning viewer or listener, if you count the original audio episodes, just go back to that, or you should already know what I'm referring to. I cried a lot because of that life change. But I want to go a little further back. I shouldn't say a little bit. I'm going to go further back. I think I had to be 12 or 13. And by that point in my life, yeah, especially when I was 12, when I was 12, I had up once, to the point where at the age of 12 I was taller than my mother. But if you somehow find my mother, if you know who she is and you find her, she'll tell you that it didn't matter that I was taller than her, because she still laid a well-conditioned leather belt across my skinny, bony legs, and I deserved it because I made a serious mistake. And I mention that because that was a time in my life, from being a small child, growing up, going through, middle school into junior high. That was really the only reason I cried, was because I got my ass whooped. I definitely wasn't in control of my emotions, and no 12 or 13-year-old is in control of their damn emotions. No. Heck, there are people twice that age, 3-4 times that age, that still aren't in control of their emotions, and that kind of goes back to the whole mental health thing I just mentioned. But me personally, that was the only reason I would cry back then, was because I got whooped. And all credit to my mother, she was a skilled whooper. And I say was, because that stopped at one point, because I moved out. and I lived on my own. I guess that's why. And I'm not willing to test that theory that she still has it. I'm gonna logically say she still has it. And again, I'm not willing to test those waters. Obviously, I've learned all my lessons. I'm a grown man, and yeah, that's where we're gonna leave that. But anyway, that was the only reason why I cried, because it hurt. I was being physically hurt. And I had, you know what? No, I'm lying. I had a couple of those, a few moments when I was younger, or around that same time in my life, let's say elementary school age. So we're talking 5, 6 years old through hell 10, 11, 12 years old, where I had those rage cries where you got so mad at somebody that it might have come to blows, and you got so mad you wanted to fight and you started tearing, like you were maybe throwing fists and also dropping some tears at the same time. I got a cousin who shall remain nameless that is the sole reason for those instances. I love you. You know who you are, fam. But there were moments in my life as a kid where I rage cried. Now, the kind of crying because you're overwhelmed with emotion, those count as a kid. But it wasn't until I became a teenager, like a real teenager, like high school teenager. I was in high school and I was experiencing other things in life. Like, for example, me personally, I was trying to cope with the absence of my father, my biological father. I was getting through heartbreak from the opposite sex. I really tried a lot and often too hard in high school to have a girlfriend. And for example, I would invest so much of my heart, if you will, if I even had heart then. I invested so much heart and emotion into the girls I had crushes on, or the girls I was interested in, that I would set myself up. I mean, literally set myself up and sabotage myself for heartbreak when I found out that they weren't interested in me like that. And I was so inexperienced, so lacking in knowledge, that in my mind I'm like, I wrote you a couple love notes. It was sweet, I walked you to class. I've been wearing button-down shirts and tucking my shirts in, trying to look, presentable, because I thought you liked that. And that only goes so far. Okay, so if those of you who are out there young and you're trying to, dress to impress, do that. That's cool. Wear clothes, comfortably. Treat the people you're interested in respectfully, whether you're gay or straight. But don't put all your chips, don't bet all your chips on those little things, those superficial things. Okay, trust me, I know from experience. But for example, heartbreak brought me to tears. And I had a girlfriend, I have to admit, I had a girlfriend for maybe a month. I think it was about a month, yeah. I was in high school. From like mid-June, and I can't remember if it was either before or just after my birthday that year. And this was, Jesus, was it 2000? 2001? Yeah, it's 2001. Yeah, June of 2001. And I messed things up with her. I mean, we were only 15, 16 years old, but chances are I messed it up. If you ask my ex-wife, she'd be like, yeah, you up. Yeah, I know you. All you do is mess up relationships, which that's a whole other story. And if my mother was here, she'd be like, Hassan, stop that. All right. But anyway, don't go off. But anyway, yeah, I mean, her and I had, broken up, and I was heartbroken over it. And I remember locking myself in not locking myself, but just kind of keeping to myself in my bedroom, and I cried because I felt like my life was over. That's all I knew. I mean, apart from, stuff that I was into as a teenager, like sports, video games, I had my best friends, trying to focus on schoolwork, that sort of thing, getting through high school. I had a girlfriend, and my mom liked her, actually. I know that's kind of rough on a side note, because I've obviously grown up and I've dated other people, and certain women have met my mother, and a couple of them felt like my mother never liked them. And I mean, there's probably one or two that my mother didn't like, especially in my recent history. But my mother liked this girl. But we were, we were teenagers. We broke up, and I was heartbroken over that. I cried because I felt sad. I eventually got interested in another girl that I had gotten to know through my dad, my stepfather. For those of you that don't know, my dad is my stepfather. And I met her. She was actually volunteering at the same time I was. Well, that's how we met. I go back to a story I told previously in a previous episode about my dad, and how I would volunteer in his community at his community church on the weekends. And this girl, who was roughly the same age as me, she came along and volunteered as well, and we instantly just started liking each other. And we weren't really a couple or anything. It's not like we went out for dates or anything. She lived in my dad's neighborhood, so when I went to go spend time with my dad, she was there like around the corner, and we would try to hang out or whatever. But at some point, she quickly, very quickly, because I only knew her for like maybe a month, she and her family moved. Never saw her again, ever. She liked me, I liked her. I mean, we really liked each other, and I was heartbroken. I dropped some tears over that. So I got through those emotions about crying. And I know a lot of people, whether they're boys or girls, for example, in your teenage years, you start to get a taste of, if you live a typical life, you start to get a taste of those kind of emotions, where about heartbreak, and especially with heartbreak. I say typical because some teenagers, unfortunately, don't live a typical life. They might, unfortunately, lose a parent. A parent might pass away, or they go through anxiety, the troubles of the anxiety of moving from one place to another, uprooting and going somewhere else, for example. That's just an example. But you kind of get a taste of emotions there. But I remember being a teenager, and I go back to what I originally tried to bring up. I remember being a teenager. I was 12, 13 years old, and I'm not going to get into great detail about the concept or the point behind his speech. But there was a line towards the end of his speech that still sticks with me. But I'm speaking of Jim Valvano. He was North Carolina State's men's basketball coach. In fact, I believe he got NC State their only national championship. I want to say it was back in 1983, 82 or 83. I can't remember. I want to say it was 83. And those guys were Cinderellas. Like, they weren't supposed to get that far, but they won. But Jim Valvano was a legendary coach who unfortunately died from cancer. If those of you out there, if you watch ESPN, or if you are an avid watcher of ESPN, especially around a certain time of the year, around the time of the ESPYs, and all the talk of the charity fundraising, everything they do for the Jimmy V Foundation for Cancer Research, it was named after Jim Valvano. And he was given, I think, the first, I want to say they named it after Arthur Ashe at that point too, the Arthur Ashe Courage Award. And he's standing on stage and he's giving a speech. He's dying of cancer. He was terminal at that point, and everybody in the room knew that his days were numbered. But he's up there, and towards the end of his speech, he's talking about, he mentions, you should have a good cry. Everybody should have a good cry. There were, a few things that everybody should do with their lives. One of them was laugh. I forget what the third one was. Forgive me. But the one that stood out the most when I heard this as a teenager, a young teenager, was that you should move your emotions to tears, or have your emotions move you to tears. You should cry every now and then. And I really didn't understand what that meant at that point. But I got older, I got through things, I did different things in my life, I got to experience different things. I was a teenager in high school and I experienced heartbreak, I experienced loss or abandonment, in terms, or in speaking in regards to the absence of my real father. And getting older and older, I got through frustration and anger, rage with my mother, because I felt like she didn't know what I was talking about. This was one thing she didn't know how to relate to me to. And I was moved to tears there. And I got through that. But when I got into my 20s, I remember when my son was born. I was 21. It was Christmas Day, the year he was born, and I was anxious at that point. I mean, I was 21, and I knew now at that point, or then at that point, that my 20s. I wasn't gonna be just some single bachelor or whatever. I wasn't gonna be able to do a lot with my life. And that wasn't depressing. It was a life change. I remember being fearful in the time that my son's mother was going through her gestational period, and he was growing. He was getting bigger in the womb, and then the day came he was born. And I remember I was in the room. I was right there. I had a front row seat to my son being birthed out, and I came to tears. Not out of fear, but there comes a life. There is a life. Well, there comes a life. That baby's born. He's out. He's in the world. He's taking his first breaths. And it moved me to tears. Now, that was a life event that I had a hand in causing. And the same thing had happened when my second son was born. I was moved to tears. I didn't cry as openly as I did the first time. But in between, I mentioned my second son actually because there was about a good 10 years in between the two. I went through different things in life where I was moved to tears, or I was older and I had more life experience where I was able to sit and maybe reflect on the tough times or the joyous times that I had in my life, and was able to just move myself to tears and flush my eyes out, if you will. Because essentially crying is a byproduct of a strong flow of emotions, whether it's sadness, grief, or it's joy, it's happiness. And in between, within those 10 years between my first son being born and my second son being born, and even, there's some sporadic moments now where I recognize the emotions that bring about tears, whether it's tears of sadness or tears of joy. I have to admit, during my wedding ceremony, I could feel those emotions. I didn't exactly drop a tear because I would have been able to wipe, and everybody that was there would have been able to see that. And my sister was one of the bridesmaids. My little sister was one of the bridesmaids, and her and I had gone to a wedding or two growing up, and we thought it was funny that somebody was, like a groom was crying, and I was trying my hardest not to cry, and she was like holding her face like, oh my God, my brother's gonna do this, in fact, it's caught in a picture, if I remember correctly, where I had that flow of emotion. That was a joyous time. It was definitely a joyous time. But anyway, I like to think at this point in my life I can recognize different life events, different times in my life or anyone's life that would bring them to tears, that would give them so much emotion that they have a good cry. In my last episode, I did an extra segment where I talked about the importance of my own mother and the other women in my life as far as Mother's Day was concerned. And I got to a point where I talked about different things that were characteristic of the efforts that my mother had put forth for the betterment of myself and my little sister and herself through us. And I came to tears. You got to watch the episode again. I wiped my face a few times, and I might have snotted a little bit. But those were not tears of sadness. I was in those moments. I had those emotions of pride because I was proud of my mother. I had feelings of gratitude, great gratitude, and just pure love for my mother and all of her efforts. Love for my grandmother and her efforts, my sisters and their efforts. And then after that segment was over, I stopped, I hit the stop button, I stopped recording, and I just had a good cry. Like, I wasn't sad, but it was just good to let those emotions flow and just cry out. And it's good for that. It's good to be able to feel emotion. Obviously, we as people, as normal as we can be as human beings, we don't want to feel those negative feelings that bring us to those negative tears. But they happen. And we cry. And in my opinion, in crying, those tears, we wipe away those tears, it makes us stronger. I get stronger even when I'm not crying. When I wipe away my tears of my children, and I have, it gives me a sense of strength and pride that I can comfort my children. I can comfort my sons and wipe away their tears. Continuing to talk about crying, a lot of folks, it's not a side note, but it's a different concept. A lot of folks went out and saw Endgame, saw Avengers Endgame, and most, if not everyone that saw that movie had seen, previous movies in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and they became so emotionally involved or emotionally attached, emotionally identifiable to various characters. And I'm not going to say what happened to those characters. Certain things happen to certain characters or certain people in that universe where they went through certain things, and as a member of the audience, we cried. We felt emotions, whether it was positive or negative, and we cried. And in my opinion, I guarantee each and every person that showed emotion, they came out stronger or more in touch with their emotions, their personal emotions, and how they relate to whether it's something fictional like that, or how something fictional can apply to real world events, real things. I remember, speaking of fiction, well, it's not really fiction, it was based on a real story, but the movie Marley and Me, about the dog that had Owen Wilson and Jennifer Aniston in there, about the dog. People who are dog owners or that have dogs or have pets, they could totally relate to that movie and the emotions that flowed because of what was portrayed in that movie. But crying is a necessary thing. It's a byproduct of a strong flow of emotions, good or bad. And we should all have a good cry, like Jim Valvano said. We should have our emotions, move us to tears. And at some point, I'm probably going to talk about laughing. Because on a side note, I think laughter is the best medicine. It's one of the best medicines. Laughter is great. We should all be brought to laugh at something. and we should all be brought to cry and just get a good cry out. It helps. It's like rebooting your computer, I guess. Or I don't know, something. It's like maintenance for our emotions. Obviously, a lot of times we cry has been brought about because of something negative, whether it's something that someone's done to us or something we witnessed or experienced or whatever. But our tears, are helpful. And I don't know if that made sense, because who really just devotes a segment to talk about crying? Hell, who devotes a segment that's pushing a half hour long to talk about crying? And on that note, we're going to wrap up this segment and talk about the next one. Okay, next up is something that's a part of life a lot of people believe in. Kind of goes hand in hand with karma. Karma is something I mentioned before previously. This segment is about fate. Fate, a definition of fate reads as the development of events beyond a person's control, regarded as determined by a supernatural power. Excuse me. Fate, I tend to believe in fate sometimes. And for those who might not be able to grasp what fate is, or an example of fate, fate can be I don't know, I guess there's a kid at a baseball game. He's got a ticket for his own seat, and his mom and his dad, or maybe just his dad, it's a father-son kind of thing, maybe they have their tickets and they're sitting in their seats or whatever, and at some point the kid wants to switch seats with his dad. I mean, it's not really a big deal, it's just the two of them, whatever, but the kid switches seats with his dad. Pop fly, or a ball gets hit, it's a foul ball, and that kid is sitting in the prime position right then and there to catch that foul ball. He might not have caught that foul ball had he kept his original seat, but because of fate, or because of just that change in the process or whatever, him switching that seat gave him or allowed for the fate in which he experienced, or he was a part of. He was able, through fate, to be in the right place at the right time to catch that foul ball. Some people like to associate faith with luck. I've heard a story or two where somebody might have got a big payday on like a slot machine in a casino, and they felt it was fate that they got to the casino at that one point in time, to then, I don't know, have to wait for an elevator to get to a particular part of the, to get to a particular floor in that casino, and they dropped something, they were able to pick it up or whatever, and through the divine work of fate, or of timing, they were able to get to that one slot machine at that one point in time to put in the coin or coins, to then pull on the lever or push the button or whatever, to then end up winning the jackpot. They thought it was fate, like it was something supernatural, or some kind of a higher power intervened, stepped in, and made it possible for that person to win that jackpot. Some people say that when they win a lottery, or they win a jackpot off of a scratch-off ticket, like they were meant to, be driving down the street, to get stuck at a red light, to be held up to get to the 7-Eleven or gas station or wherever, to have to wait behind somebody that bought a handful of scratch-offs before them so that they could be allowed to get to that one point to get that one scratch-off ticket to win like $1 million. It was fate that it happened that way. And some people, associate fate with meeting their significant other. Of course, that might have been before online dating was a thing. I mean, there were maybe so many stories of fate when people used to just meet people in public. Like, there was no such thing as dating websites or dating apps. You just go out, with your friends or whatever. You're at a bar or you're at a social function, a party or something like that, or wherever, somewhere out in public, and you just happen to be in the right place at the right time to meet that special someone. I'll go even further. It's fate that we end up the way that we end up, or your kids end up the way that they end up, because of the odds, or because of how much, this is going to sound really, really weird, how much DNA one parent is giving to the other parent, for lack of better terms. And one of those pieces of DNA, one of those cells gets to the other thing, and fertilizes it, and then science happens and you end up with your child. I know that sounds really weird, but quite frankly, that's how we all ended up here, okay? The same kind of thing. It was fate. Or science, whatever. I don't know, I kind of went off the path on that one, but anyway. I personally like to look at fate. For example, I was supposed to, or maybe it's a way of me accepting the way things have gone on in my life. And I look at other people's lives and I kind of think the same way. I look at it personally within my own life like, yes, I was supposed to meet my son's mother, and we were supposed to be together, I felt. And we were supposed to have our child. And our child was supposed to be born when he was born and grow up the way he was grown up. Because in the end, it all made sense that I was supposed to learn the lessons I was learning. I was supposed to get the life experience I was supposed to get. I'd like to think the same thing with her, because for the most part, her and I are both very thankful that we have our son, that our son is who he is. We're proud of him. We're happy with him for the most part. Wink, wink, son. But I look at it perhaps as fate. Like, everything was supposed to happen that way, because ultimately, at least for me, I was supposed to experience everything that I experienced. For example, in being that boy's father. I felt like, because then I look at it in terms of my second son. If my first son was never born, I might not have had the life experience to be able to be at least a decent father to my second son, because a lot of time had passed. I joked with somebody recently that because when I told her, I was like, yeah, my first son is this age, and then I took 10 years to have another one. Like, the joke was, it was like, yeah, I took a break from reproducing, almost just about 10 years. But yeah, in that time, I look at it as fate bringing all those pieces together, or all those things together, so that I can ultimately achieve something later on in the future, or be a better person in the future. I look at fate as, or applying it to the relationships, the personal relationships that I had through my 20s and my early 30s, even recently. I feel perhaps I was supposed to do what I've done over the last 6 years. To go through what I've gone through, to experience what I've experienced, good or bad, whether I wanted it or not, whether I know what's really going on or I don't, or whatever. I was meant to go through all this to learn the lessons, to be able to realize that, yeah, I was supposed to do that. I was supposed to have highs and lows and learn from those highs and those lows and become a better person, or to I guess test my willpower, test my inner strength, test my fortitude. And through all of that, through the work of fate, become a better person, a rebuilt person, go through a rebirth, if you will, to become a better person for the next person, for the next person I would be with, or whatever. I was meant to. Fate made it possible. Yeah. That's where fate applies, at least in my life. And perhaps fate can do the same for others. I don't think it's ever really been said to me. However, like, I used to think it was romantic when I was younger, when I was much younger. Like, somebody would say to me, like, I was supposed to be here in this moment, or, you know, I thank God, or I thank what, or whomever, for, yeah, I was a teenager and hung out at the mall a lot when folks under 18 could hang out at the mall. That's how old I am. Yeah, I think that's the thing now. Like, I'm this old. Like, I got to hang out at the Walden Galleria without having someone 18 or over with me old. That's how old I am, when I was a teenager. But anyway, being a teenager, I hung out at the mall a lot, and I thought, you know, someone would say, you know, it was because of fate. Like, you know, I'm so thankful that I was at the mall that night, at the movies. I went into that movie theater and I sat near you, or I saw you, and I got your phone number, and now here we are. That was fate. I used to think that was romantic. I used to think fate was only romantic. Like, I didn't think it was really going to be able to teach a lesson, or teach a life lesson, or be able to provide a life lesson, like I just mentioned. Like, it's been a great coping mechanism to try to think about how fate fits into my current life, or my recent life over the last year or two. It's been a great coping mechanism to me, because I look at everything that I've experienced, all the things that I've discovered, or been revealed, or disclosed, or confessed to me, or whatever, where I'm like, okay, that was supposed to happen. And had that not happened, I wouldn't have been able to get to this point, or experience this, or experience that, or know this. And had that never happened, if not for fate, I wouldn't be where I am now. Or I wouldn't be able to say that I've gotten this far, or that I've been able to achieve this or achieve that. Another example is I go back to my firstborn. Had I not become a father, I have no idea when I would have eventually become a father. But had he not been born when he was, I might not have been able to further get over the absence that had troubled me so much as a teenager, and those years leading up to becoming 20, 21. Had my firstborn, had my son not been born, I wouldn't have learned, when I learned the importance of being a father. I mean, who knows? I might have gotten through life, or lived my life, without knowing how valuable fatherhood is, like how impactful that is, how strengthening that is, parenthood is. I might not have learned the lessons as a parent and been able to appreciate my mother more for her being a parent. I might not have been able to appreciate, as soon as I did, the sacrifices that my grandparents made, my aunts and my uncles made for their kids, and and myself, for my generation. Might not have known that if not for my son. And I'll go a step further, if not for his mother. Yeah, had I not met his mother, things wouldn't have happened the way that they happened. We wouldn't have gotten our son out of it. And it just trickles down. It just goes on, through the work of time and fate. So that's an example of fate. Where does fate fit in for you? Like, do you have, those of you out there, do you have a significant other, for example, that you can, recall where fate, had a hand in you two coming together? Or maybe, other life events? Can you think of where fate might have had a hand in those life events? Do you believe in fate? And if you don't, that's okay. I mean, a lot of people out there, of course, believe that the higher power is God, or whichever God that they worship, they believe in. It's because of that higher power that the things happen the way that they happen. It's because of that intervention, that divine intervention, if you will. Those things happening the way that they happen. So where does it apply to you? Does it apply to you? Will it ever apply to you? Let me know. Respond. Give me your thoughts. All right, we're going to wrap up that discussion and move on to some miscellaneous things. We'll see what I can come up with. All right. Okay, this segment is going to cover a few miscellaneous topics, and the first one right off the bat, recently, this was seen on usatoday.com's website, but recently news got out that a new hotel of I guess different kind of style, was set to open in Palm Springs, California. This hotel is the Taco Bell Hotel. Again, that is the Taco Bell Hotel. It's catchy, it rhymes, but there really isn't much to it except what you might imagine, on the surface, that perhaps the Art Deco is what you would, usually find in a in a restaurant, or in your local neighborhood Taco Bell restaurant, and it's quite likely that the food on the menu, like imagine if they have a continental breakfast, is like continental specific to Mexico, because that's what you get out of Taco Bell. At least that's what you kind of get out of Taco Bell. I'm not really personally, I have to say, I'm not personally into Taco Bell. It's okay. If I had a choice, I might go to a place called Mighty Taco. For those of you out there who aren't familiar with the Western New York area, Mighty Taco is pretty legendary in this area, and they have things on their menu that you just can't get at Taco Bell. But if Taco Bell's your thing, that's cool. I've been seen at a Moe's every now and then. I've been seen at Chipotle as well. But Taco Bell is not the top of my list. The article itself, and I tried to do some research, just kind of weird. I mean, I've got other things, other priorities in life, and I actually took a few moments to try to see, was this real, and what is this all about? And it seems to be pretty real. There really isn't much else to it that you would imagine. I mean, it's kind of like, for example, if McDonald's opened a chain of hotels. You'd have, what you could get for breakfast, for example. If they give you breakfast in the mornings, it's your breakfast menu. Same thing with lunch and dinner or whatever. I don't know. It just seemed interesting. Would I stay there? Yeah, probably. I'd stay there and then bring McDonald's or KFC or some kind of food in there, depending on how long my stay is, because I don't want to. I don't want to eat Taco Bell my entire stay that I'm there. It just seems kind of weird. I would stay there though, just to say that I was there, like just to see what it was like. I'm interested to sleep in there, and do the hallways smell like Taco Bell? Like any fast food restaurant has its own specific smell respective to that particular restaurant. Like you walk into KFC, it's always going to smell like a KFC. You walk into McDonald's, it's always going to smell like that. You walk into Taco Bell, it's always going to smell like that. I just wonder, is the smell the same? I wonder what the artwork, what the ambiance is like. Are the late nights in the hotel room or in the hotels going to be like late nights at Taco Bell? Long lines through the drive-through, you know what I mean? People at least half drunk trying to get some kind of customer service. Who knows? But yeah, it was something to talk about. It just seemed pretty interesting. Something you really don't, hear of. And if you didn't hear about it or hear of it before, now you do. All right, the next one is a little bit more. Next little small topic I want to talk about is a little bit more serious in nature, to say the least. Definitely something worth talking about, I would say. And in recent news, New York State lawmakers have proposed a bill to outlaw smartphone use while crossing the street, which I think, in my opinion, I think it's a necessity. I think smartphone use out in public should be regulated a little bit more than it is. It's one thing if you're gonna put laws on the books or a law on the book to outlaw texting while driving, which quite frankly is not really enforced, at least not around here. If we're talking New York State, it's not enforced that much. I don't really see it enforced that much. I find myself either next to or behind somebody who is texting while driving, and it's pretty damn obvious. So texting while driving, to outlaw that is one thing. If you're gonna outlaw crossing the street, by all means, yeah. But then again, I'm kind of the kind of person that believes in, or at least occasionally believes in Darwinism, the survival of the fittest. Just let those who aren't, I don't want to say bright enough, but just aren't, don't seem like they would survive. Just let them, let nature take its course, I suppose. And if you're going to use your smartphone, like if you're going to look down at your phone while you're crossing a street, you're not even going to bother to look to see if it's a red or a green light. Even if it is a red light, you should still be aware enough to just realize what's around you. You're rolling the dice, and if you're gonna mess around with your smartphone while you're crossing, especially if you're jaywalking, not crossing at a crosswalk, you're rolling the dice. And I'm the kind of person that says, well, whatever happens, happens. Let the chips fall where they may. So I kind of wonder what made lawmakers get on that. I have to assume that somewhere, maybe close to the state capitol or elsewhere, different places around the state, there have been casualties of such a thing, crossing fatal casualties, that is, or severe casualties, if you will, stemming from like crossing a busy street or crossing through traffic while using a smartphone. I've seen people walk into parked cars, walk into utility poles, street signs, walls, all-out walls, other people, while using their smartphone because they're just not paying attention. It's completely unrelated, but I remember watching a hockey game once. Yes, black people watch hockey games. Black people even play hockey games. But anyway, I was watching a hockey game once, and the color commentator had made this comment about one of the players who wasn't watching where he was going. He was looking in one direction, following the play, and didn't see this guy who had like a foot on him. Didn't see a defender come in and practically kind of like blindsided him. Didn't knock him out, but I mean the hit was, definitely significant. And the color commentator said, "Well, if you're not paying attention, you'll pay the price." And the same could be said of those who seem to be really glued to the screens of their smartphones out in public. We'll see what this law does. If it's like texting while driving, I'm not sure if it's going to be enforced very well or very very aggressively, or what have you. So we'll see. It's a nice idea in my opinion, and I'd like to think I'm not the only person that shares that opinion, but we'll see. Who knows? All right, the last topic I want to discuss is in regards to Game of Thrones. Now, I'm not spoiling anything for anyone. I have nothing to spoil anything with because, quite frankly, or quite honestly, straight up, full disclosure, I don't watch Game of Thrones. I actually never have. It just so happened one time I stumbled upon an episode. I was actually at a friend's house, and he's got HBO. I don't. I haven't really had HBO in a while, and when I did have HBO as part of my TV service, I really wasn't watching episodes of Game of Thrones. I probably could have when it first started, maybe, but then I would have had to, continuously watch it, or at least commit time to binge watching in case I missed episodes. And the same could be said of other popular shows. I just didn't have the time to sit and watch an episode of a show consistently if it was on, broadcast television or whatever. I never took the time to DVR anything. As far as shows that are on streaming services like Netflix or Amazon, Hulu, that sort of thing, I would have had to have sat and just, binge watch. And I just really didn't have the time to do that kind of thing. But anyway, I wanted to talk about Game of Thrones, and I know it's done now, and a lot of people, the final season just ended, and a lot of people had a lot to say about that as far as discontent. If you want to talk about discontent, a lot of people were very discontent with the ending of the show. Seemed to be a lot of disappointment. There was some, from what I saw on social media, there was some some unexpected things that had occurred. Characters doing certain things. People died, but then again, people always died on that show. I think it seemed like everybody died on that show. But now that the entire show is over, the final season has ended, the show is over, I wanted to jump back a little bit, a couple of weeks back, to the news, and I guess you could say it went viral, but it was definitely news in regards to an online petition that at one point I think it crossed over 500,000 signatures or e-signatures, or 500,000 individual users of social media, or whomever, that petitioned, or they were trying to petition HBO and the producers, the filmmakers of the show or whatever, to redo the final season because they were so disappointed and and dissatisfied with what they were watching. I'd like to think that it's still going on, because the end of the show, it was what it was. There might have been a few people from what I saw or that I connected to on social media that were okay with how the show ended. They felt, okay, it was decent, but a lot more people, they were outnumbered by people who definitely found definitely found flaws, big flaws, and or disappointments, letdowns in how the final season apparently brought everything together or finished the story off. It's not exactly the same extreme, but in thinking about it, it came to mind The Dark Knight Rises, and how disappointing, or how disappointed some Batman fans were with that last movie and the Dark Knight trilogy. And me personally, I saw it. I waited in line, went to the theater, saw it the night it opened, and I was okay with it. I felt that it wasn't too bad. It could have been better, yeah. And I imagine, because that came out in, I should know what year it came out. I think it was 2008 when it came out. No, it wasn't 2008. It was, 2008 was when The Dark Knight came out. Dark Knight Rises came out, I think it was in 2011. I think it was. I should know this. I'm a big Batman fan. But anywho, if it came out, nowadays, like in the last year or two, could you imagine people getting online and filing a petition? They're like Christopher Nolan and DC Comics and Warner Brothers telling them to redo that third movie. It's a lot of logistics to think about. Let's say it got to a point where HBO was like, yeah, let's redo the final season. You got to get actors and actresses back. And they're not going to do anything for free, I'd like to think, especially if they're SAG actors and actresses, Screen Actors Guild, the union. You got to pay them. There's a Producers Guild, a Writers Guild, aka unions. They got to get paid. Okay, they're not just going to do anything for free. They got to get paid. There's money to be made and people to be paid fairly for their efforts if you're going to redo the show. Perhaps you just have to, with that being said, perhaps you, the fans, you, the petitioners, you're probably just going to have to live with it. Or read the books, or who knows, maybe there's some fan fiction out there that could put a better ending to this saga that is or was Game of Thrones. So we'll see. I just thought it was kind of funny, online petition, and to see what would happen. And petitions, on a side note, petitions don't always work. Yeah, petitions don't always work. They are a show of force, yeah, because so many folks have, actually responded or answered the call or stood up and signed a list, or in this case e-signed or whatever, by putting their signature on it and affirming that they also agree with whatever the movement the petition is going for. But just because a petition is going, and just because it might have 500,000 signatures, for example, that doesn't mean that the powers that be, or the people you're bringing that petition to, will agree with it, will accept it and move on it. So you may just have to, you Game of Thrones fans out there, you're probably just gonna have to live with it. Life goes on, the world turns. Okay, enough of that miscellaneous talk. We're gonna move on to the 29. All right, this is the 29. It is time to close down the show, or close down the episode. I'm saying show like this is a real deal thing, like I'm on TV or something. Time to close down this episode, this 7th episode, which I hope has some kind of luck to it. If you're superstitious, lucky number 7. Let's hope this episode is. What we're gonna do first is go through the riddle again. And here we go. The riddle reads as: some people see me to be linear. To others, I'm not. I'm always marching forward and can never stop. I watch you in your days until we have to part ways. What am I? The answer is time. Time indeed. Time to put a close on this episode, as I just said. Thank you for watching or at least listening. I really appreciate your attention, your time, the effort it takes to pay attention, or at least to just give a damn, really. There are definitely other things in life or in your daily life that you could be doing other than paying attention to me. But since you have, obviously I appreciate it. This was my 7th podcast episode. It was this is my third video one. I had 4 audio ones to begin with, and I'd like to think I'm getting my feet at least a little wet, maybe a little damp, not full on soaked. I don't know. That's okay. I'm talking weird about that, but I like to think I have a little bit of experience now going forward with this whole process. I'd like to think I have a good grasp on the format or the style, what I want to try to do. And having said that, my next episode, which I'm not sure when that will be out, I might have a co-host, and we'll see how that works out. I want to try maybe having somebody like a partner or a co-host to just try to play off of and just keep the conversation going. And we'll take it from there. Maybe try a topic or 2 or 3 or 4, depending. We'll see. But thanks for listening, for watching. And remember, whatever you do, don't give up. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.